Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Crowley, the once and maybe future king, who knows? But before we dive into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole Stokes.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a Supernatural fan since season 3, started writing fanfic in 2012, continue on to this day, and this is my little sidekick, Natasha.
A hellhound.
A hellhound.
And
He really
Carole.
is a sidekick, yes.
Yeah.
I've got two Carols, so I'm going to have to go with both names, but
You could call us Carole M and Carole S, but anyway, whatever you want, Gail, we'll figure it out. Yes, hi, I'm Carole Malcolm, the director of the Urban Fantasy Track at DragonCon, and we cover Supernatural on the track. I started watching the show back when it first began. It wasn't really a tagline, but one of the ways that people used to talk about it back in those days was that it was like Buffy with boys. And I thought, okay, I got to check it out, because I was also a big Buffy fan from the beginning. So I did start watching it, and I haven't gone down the rabbit hole quite the way that some people have, which they will mention. But I have watched it since the very beginning, and this over the last year and a half, I started doing this. This all began in 2020, because we know what that was all about. Doing the Supernatural Rewind is what I called it, and that was a monthly virtual panel about for a different season, representing the different seasons. And it took us a little while to get through for 15 years of it, but it was a lot of fun. So.
Okay. And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my modern day worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home. I came into Supernatural halfway through season 11, fell in love, went down the rabbit hole, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months to be ready for season 12, and fell into fanfic, and the rest is history. So yeah, absolutely. I am that person down the rabbit hole, and I
yes,
haven't. Yeah. So we'll get into all kinds of stuff about Crowley, but first, what's your favorite thing? What makes him your favorite king of hell? Carole Malcolm?
All right, first, you did summon him by saying his name. I think I should just keep it up there all night.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much. I'll get sore arms keeping up. That's a really good question, because he was always one of my favorite characters. I mean, outside of the leads, of course, but he was always one of my favorite of the other characters on the show. And I think it's really easy. It's easy to forget by just his manner and how he's amusing. Let's face it, he had most of the best lines whenever all of the episodes he was in. And I think it's easy to forget how really awful he was in some, not in the very beginning, but kind of the midway through his time on the show. And I had forgotten some of that. And I think it's easy to forget when it's somebody that you really admire. And I think that probably one of the reasons he's so appealing to me is that one-note villains are not interesting. The mustache twirling stuff is just not, it doesn't make sense. And with Crowley, we did get to see what made him the way, how he developed, how he started out, what he became, and all of that. But I think that there was that aspect to him that he could just make you forget some of the stuff that he did that was so awful.
Yeah, true. Carole Stokes?
And you can call me Fire if you want, if that makes it easier. He's definitely such a rich character. He's very, very rich. Like Carole Malcolm says, not one note. There was a lot of depth to him. He could be evil. He could be funny. He could display a surprising moment of friendship and helpfulness, and almost heart of gold. But then he would turn around and do something and remind you he really doesn't have a heart of gold. He's the king of hell. So the fact that he had this richness and this range that he could play within his character, and then I think the crowning point for me is his wit. He's just so witty. Things can be going head over tail towards the apocalypse, and he is snarking away and never failing to make you laugh, or not the boys, but us, the viewers, anyway, could laugh.
Yeah, I had seen Mark Shepard and so many other things. He's that guy. If you don't turn in your geek card, and I always was very impressed with how he portrayed the characters, because he always did bring a lot of depth and nuance to them. And so I really loved seeing that in Crowley as he progressed through the series, that there was more to him than just a bad guy. He had reasons for doing what he did, even when he tried to play off that he was just being evil for the sake of being evil. He usually had some kind of plan. And he had redeeming moments, even when he was at the worst of his, I know this isn't a word, but it should be, evility. Unlike Asmodeus.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Unlike Asmodeus or Lucifer, he had good reasons for what he did beyond just, I'm a bad guy, so I'm bad. And yes, his wit and humor was terrific. And then when we got to see him paired off with Rowena, even better. And he was very much a worthy villain or a worthy frenemy to the boys. He wasn't somebody they could easily best. He was somebody who was better working with them than against them. And that made him interesting. He wasn't just a bad guy to be conquered.
He was always a challenge. When they were at odds with him, he was always a challenge. Like, he really challenged them to, figure things out. And then when they were working together, he was really good about being inventive in meeting the challenges they were facing as a team, including sometimes just kind of striking out and doing something that Sam and Dean thought was really crazy or at a left angle, but he just did it, and then they would be like, oh. So he was very inventive, and he was very challenging, and yeah, witty as all heck.
So
what are the adversary?
Yes.
What are some of your favorite Crowley moments? Carole Stokes?
Boy, there's so many. There are so many.
Said his name, so he's bad.
I liked when he was interacting with Juliet, his hellhound. Natasha likes that here. She kind of whispered it in my ear. To him, she was his big puppy. Everybody else is like, oh my God, this hellhound, and it's going to eat us alive. And he's like, there, and tossing her little treats and stuff. And he's short, and he'd be like patting her way up here. And the way to him, she was so real, made her so real to us. And that's one of those little things that really demonstrates some good craft, where he's not just pretending and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, he's pretending. No, we believed that Juliet was there. We could see her, and that was just how he operates, where he's so invested in whatever is happening around him as an actor and a character, that he really brings that to us. So the Juliet moments were really, really cute for that reason.
Yeah, considering the guy is interacting with a tennis ball in front of a green
Yeah.
and makes that real to us. And there is some adorable fan fiction where he gifts the boys one of Juliet's puppies, and when they're in the bunker, and Sam, of course, wants to keep the puppy. Dean is like, you know, one of these killed me, right? And of course, they end up keeping the puppy, and it's just total schmoop, but it's really an adorable story. Carole Malcolm.
Gosh, for me, it's hard to pick just one. But I like, I what's that?
Then don't. We've got time.
I think one of the other reasons that I appreciate the character and the actor so much is that he does get to run the gamut of different kinds of scenes. He can be amusing, anything that he can be humorous at the same time he's being serious. I like his interactions with Dean, or with Demon Dean, if you want to call it that, and how they're hanging out together. Of course, the phone. I remember being just being cracked up by this when I saw it the first time, when they show you who's calling him and he says not Moose. That who shows up on the caller ID, and I think that's hilarious. But I think I like that, but I also liked some of his scenes with Rowena when they got to be a bit more serious. And I think it was sad that that they were still at odds when he died, that they didn't get to really be that honest with each other. They were honest to a point, but not completely. And I think some of that, he talked about her a lot. And obviously the way that she treated him, and, when she was raising him, or, not, uh, talk about John Winchester's parenting skills. Anyway, he's got nothing on her for sure. But I think that with Crowley also, one of the things that I always enjoyed the most of any episode is when they sort of all banded together, these people that had all these disparate, different ideas, and when they were all getting together trying to beat Amara, that I liked him in those scenes and episodes as well, where you could tell he actually liked being part of a team. And even though he never came right out and said that, it gave you you were able to ascertain that from the way that he behaved in those situations. The guys are used to it because they always got each other, unless they're having one of their little hissy fit times and they're not talking or whatever, but they're used to that. They're used to that feeling. And he is not, because, when he's in hell, which I also think is funny that Dean always talks, well, he hates that place. So I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, and when they say those things, it's kind of funny because we do forget that he much preferred being on Earth, and that's why we see him there so much. But I think that it's just, he's so entertaining because of the fact that you can see him in these completely different situations, and he's always believable when he's being turned more human by the human blood, and all of that. That was a very interesting kind of transition in his character to see, which he never completely left behind after it kind of recycled through him, I guess. He wasn't quite as, he didn't have it, those effects to the same extent for the whole time, but some of that remained. And I think that he hit that note just right in between all of those times. through that whole journey.
Mhm.
I think one of my favorite episodes was when we saw the flashback of him with Ramiel, Prince of Hell. There's no way
Oh
to
yeah,
say it. And you find out that he didn't become King of Hell by having some big smackdown epic
right.
battle. He was quick on his feet to take an opportunity when it was offered to him. And so he didn't sally forth into some big war. He just said yes at the right time. And that's so in character for him to avoid the blood if he could, and
Mhm.
just kind of maneuver his way into a position.
Mhm.
And so I thought that was really interesting to see that part of his backstory, as well as, and this is going to segue into my next question, seeing and hearing him talk about Rowena, interact with Rowena, and to see that even when they were really at odds, saying they hated each other, Mark gave us the vulnerability of
Right.
the kid who came from an abusive background and can't stop still trying to love the abusive parent. That there's that little bit of it in there. He knows Rowena's just going to let him down again, just screw him over again. But that kid really wants mom to be different this time. And I thought that was a brilliant nuance to bring to a character who, didn't have to be that nuanced in the hands of a less capable actor. So what about the Crowley Rowena dynamic? Carole? Stokes?
I think one thing that would have been interesting to see is, I know in other panels we've discussed Rowena's road to redemption, where when she finally leaves this, her character departs, she's in a much different position than when she begins. Now, Crowley dies well before she's maybe barely kind of beginning to make the baby steps into that arc. And so we never get to see him dealing with the Rowena who matured and grew so much in the later seasons. And it would have been really interesting to see how would he have dealt with that, and how would she have dealt with him? Like, would she finally have seen him in a more favorable, affectionate light? There's a lot of dynamics that we didn't get to see. Certainly, I mean, when we first even find out that she is his mother, that was a great moment, because we had no idea. And then he's like, she's Fergus, and he's like, mother, and then we're like, oh man, something good's gonna happen here. And they play off each other so crisply. Both Ruth and Mark really sink their teeth into that. And if they weren't both so strong, you could see it. If they had been with a weaker character or a lesser actor, it almost could have overbalanced one way or the other. But they're both so strong, and their characters are so strong, that it was a really great clash. It was always, he's on top, she's on top, he's trying something, she's trying something. And it was just a real great struggle of wills and struggle of power. Always
It was
really
almost a competition too.
Yeah.
The way you
So
to see who was
yeah.
going to come out on top at any given
Right.
time.
Right. And who is double crossing who, and who got the triple cross in. And it always made it really, really entertaining to watch.
Carole Malcolm?
Yeah, well, I mentioned before that I thought it was too bad that that he was gone. It was losing him, so she no longer had her punching bag or whatever. That made her miss him as much as she did, because she was upset, and she kept saying that, the fact that her son was dead, and she was showing a lot of remorse that he was gone, and yet you would never have known that from the way she treated him when he was still alive. And it was, so that was sad in and of itself. And I think that from the other perspective, from his side, as you said, Gail, he was coming from, his memories of her, even though they had been many hundreds of years ago, were not pleasant, and that she was an abusive parent. I mean, I guess anybody would be considered that who actually abandons their child. So he has these specific memories of her, and yet he's still trying to reconcile that with, well, but she's my mom, and we didn't see that from her until after he died, where, she could say, well, because she told him in the earlier part, or the earlier episodes of her entry into the series was, she kind of blamed him for, the fact that she, was held back by all these things that she wanted to do, but she couldn't because he was around, and, all of that. So he was holding her back from being being recognized for the great witch that she was, or something to that effect. And I just think that was really sad that they didn't get to come to some kind of an understanding before he died. And I know that happens in real life situations too, but it just seemed kind of sad because from our perspective, we saw it all from one side, only from Crowley's side until he died. And then supposedly Rowena's upset when she treated him like crap the whole time he was alive, so it was kind of weird to me, but I guess that goes back to that whole, abuser type, the abuser and the abusee type relationship. And I do agree that she's a great character and that she does, evolve. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. And maybe the loss of him was one of those things that set her on that path. But, I just found that relationship to be sad, though I will say I'm very much looking forward to having both Mark Shepard and Ruth Connell at Dragon on some supernatural panels. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we've had them both before at con, but not at the same time. So this will be great.
Oh, that'll be fun. We never find out who Crowley's father was, right?
No, I don't think it's ever mentioned. Yeah.
Just that he
So
was,
we also
was wealthy, and he was, I think almost like either an aristocrat or, at least a moneyed, high up in the neighborhood kind of guy. But he just kicked her aside and went on his merry way.
Yeah, and my headcanon on that, I guess, based on that little bit of information we have, is that Rowena was poor and mortal and taken advantage of by somebody of higher status against whom she had no recourse, and very possibly left with a child against her will, and struggled through to make the best of it with no help from anybody.
Right.
And so it doesn't excuse her behavior, certainly not 600 years later. One does hope, one learns. But it does kind of set up the dynamic there that's sometimes all too common. And I think both of them are tragic figures who kind of stumble toward redemption and self-awareness.
Yeah, she resents his birth and his presence for what it did to her life, and he's resenting her for not being, a good mother and what it did to his life. And they're both kind of locked into these roles that, as you say, 600 years later, are very difficult to break out of.
And she didn't even sell him for 5 coins when he could juggle. He was an attractive.
That's right. That's
And then again, he sells his soul for 3 more inches on his willy. So family decision making here, maybe not the best. There could be a pattern there.
It's hereditary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Short-term goals.
Pardon? Short-term goals, short-term thinking. Yeah. So then we get to see a different aspect of Crowley with Gavin and Rowena with Oscar. And that kind of twists everything. Carole Stokes?
And that whole thing doesn't go well either.
No.
Gavin has no use for him. And I think he's torn. I think we see him both scorning Gavin, but then also like, well, he's my son and maybe I should try to do better to him because I did not have a good life as a son. So I think sometimes he just doesn't even know like what to do with himself. He's, he doesn't know what to do with this person and this situation. And Gavin's not particularly helpful because he's like, stay away from me. And then, Gavin's life is just like, it's a yo-yo. He's dead.
Right.
Oh, he comes back. Oh no, he has to go be dead again. It's just like, what? So that was a brief but very snarled relationship.
Mm-hmm. Carole Malcolm?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was most interesting about that whole situation was that, when Gavin found out what his presence there was kind of causing, I mean, in Crowley's present, that it was causing those particular issues, he made the choice on his own that he wanted to go back, and Rowena is telling Crowley to accept it, that he's not like us, he cares about things or whatever. And then you come to find out afterwards that she was just trying to get back at Crowley for Oscar. And I thought that was really sad because I thought, lady, this is your own grandson, and I mean, I know she didn't know him, she didn't know of it, she didn't even know he existed, I don't think so. That was the impression I had until they told her or whatever. So, and there would have been no reason for her to know because, they would have been long estranged before Gavin had been born. So I thought that was really sad because it was obvious that it meant that Gavin meant something to Crowley. And that he resented the guys telling him, oh, you need to, this is the only way that, that this present time is going to be saved is if we send you back and let you die the way you were supposed to originally. And, that, and of course, time travel always makes everybody's headache anyway, but so, you start from that and then you're throwing in all this emotional stuff. It's like, but I thought that was really sad. Now, of course, what Crowley did to Oscar, using him as the sacrifice, or finding him as that sacrifice when he found out about him, that was awful too. But this was, to me, the other one was more awful, just because it is your own flesh and blood. And Oscar had already been around all those years. I mean, he'd had a nice long life. He seemed like a nice guy, don't get me wrong. But it was sad and it was terrible at the time. But I think I just felt as though Rowena's was much worse.
Now, did we ever know who Gavin's mother was? Was there anything said about,
Not even a hint.
I'm trying to remember how Rowena and he, how he got hooked up with her in the first place. I know that it was mentioned briefly. It seemed as though I want to say it was through some kind of employment or something like that they met because maybe she knew his mother or something, and he ended up doing some work for her. I want to say it was something like that, but I can't remember specifically.
it clearly didn't have a lot of, it wasn't a major plot point.
Right.
So we don't know if in this case, Crowley was it would have been back in the 1700s. So Crowley was theoretically, I'm guessing still alive at that time. Do we know how long he had been in hell?
I think he'd have to still be alive because I don't think demons procreate like that.
Well,
so I would have thought he had Gavin while he was still mortal.
very possible.
Yeah, he would have, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Although
yeah,
we
but,
don't know.
meat suits, then
Right,
again,
I
if
was gonna say, maybe he could.
but there's history repeating itself where where Crowley's father took off and left the mother with Crowley. Crowley didn't do much better by his own son and ends up not taking a hint from his own upbringing. Oscar, on the other hand, like you said, Carole, seemed to be a pretty decent kid. And I think that was where we first saw Rowena's veneer crack, that she could love Oscar. It wasn't her son, but something about him woke something in her. Maybe because she was in a better place, maybe because she wasn't fully responsible for it, maybe whatever. Maybe she didn't feel completely disempowered and at the mercy of the universe, but she was able to love him. And I think that was kind of our tip off that Rowena could be redeemed and wasn't just a big bad witch.
Right. And again, more to her than just the one note kind of thing. But I thought that that Gavin and Crowley were kind of at odds when he was a young man, because Crowley didn't want him to go on that ship. So it didn't sound to me it sounded as though to me they had a fractious relationship, but not that he had been abandoned.
Okay.
Not that he was just not part of it, because I don't think that was ever said. The scenes that they showed from the past, at least the ones that I can remember, were things like that, where they were, no, you shouldn't go off on this ship or whatever. So
And he was right.
yeah, that's true. He and this was, we don't know that he had the gift of foresight, but who knows? He just has the gift of a really cute coffee cup.
That's true.
And a really cute hellhound.
That's right. And a bright hellhound.
So I think there's unfortunately, the writing in that whole plot area of the whole Gavin Oscar thing is, there's a certain amount of, they kind of wrote these things because they needed these tools to accomplish these plot devices. I mean, in a way, they're almost more plot devices than they are characters, unfortunately. And so it's too bad, though, because even in this discussion, we can see how there's so many possibilities and things that could have been fleshed out and brought to the characters and brought to us as the viewers, and it could have been really interesting little kind of side nuggets, and instead they're just a little bit kind of shallow shadow puppets, so that Dean and Crowley and Rowena and Sam can all be at the right place at the right time doing the right thing so that X can happen. And it's kind of too bad, but we get what we get. And, you know, as I said, in this discussion alone, we've certainly explored a lot of possibilities that would have been interesting to see and could have brought out even more gradations of both Crowley and Rowena's characters.
Yeah, and that's part of episodic TV in that you don't get minor plot arcs that stick around for very long. You know, the Steins are here. The Steins are all dead. Gavin's here. Gavin's
Goodness, though, we don't want them around. Yeah.
dead. No,
Uh,
but they could have been an interesting foil longer than they were.
Mhm.
They could have stirred up more trouble. I would have rather had the Steins around longer than Asmodeus, as long as we had, or God knows, Nick. But that's just me. I got tired. I got tired of the Lucifer's back again. Oh crap. You know, but we sometimes those minor arcs were here and gone, like you said, Carole Stokes, before we really got a chance to have it sink in. And I think Gavin.
We hardly got to know ye.
Gavin, we are.
yes, yeah.
So let's look at both Crowley and Rowena's desire to make hell great again. And it's interesting because Sam and Dean both experienced a hell that was so traumatic and so torture-based and so awful. And yet Crowley turns it into everybody's worst day at work. I mean, not only are they waiting in endless lines and then they get to the front and have to go back, but I'm betting that somewhere they were all in endless staff meetings that never stopped.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, and then Rowena throws receptions and all the demons are, we have receptions now. You know, none of this good bloody stuff. We have receptions. What do you think about the whole making hell great again in their versions of it? Carol, Malcolm?
Well, you know, I think it has to do partly with their own personalities. You know, if the idea is supposed to be that, you know, that hell has to be some uncomfortable place to be, then Crowley had the right idea for making it a place where people are just miserable, you know, in terms of you got to wait in this line and you get to the front and you have to go back, as you said, you know, things like that. He had that was a funny scene with Cassiel when they're going through and he's like, well, look at all these, you know, I have all these ideas. And Cass is like, what? You know, I mean, it seemed as though it was kind of not as important as what they were dealing with at the time, but it was so Crowley, just that very idea. And I think that with Rowena, you know, the parts we heard about was that they have receptions now. And, you know, Kevin makes a comment near the end where, well, her feeling, or in one of the last season episodes where, you know, she feels as though people are going to end up where they're supposed to be, so there aren't deals anymore. Whereas from Crowley's perspective, that's how, you know, he got started. So he's seeing this as a way to, you know, continue, you know, kind of the status quo of what had been done before, and then, you know, adding his own special touches of, you know, the endless lines and probably, as you said, Gail, staff meetings too. But, you know, and for Rowena, we heard about the fun stuff she was doing or the cool stuff, but we didn't hear about anything else. So we don't really know. And that kind of makes sense anyway, because Rowena was always a bit more insidious than Crowley was. You know, he was more of a, he was kind of an upfront king of hell. You know, not that he couldn't be devious, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying he was, even when he was being devious, you usually knew that you were expecting the other shoe to drop. And with Rowena, she could kind of make you think one thing when it's really she's doing something else. So I don't know. I just think that their different versions sort of reflected their personalities, I guess.
So maybe Rowena invited everybody to a reception and then gave them eternal food poisoning from the canapes.
That's right. Yeah.
That would would be evil.
Yeah,
Carole
they
Stokes,
did have a newsletter too. That was what his name started with a B. The demon who had possessed Jack's body for a while.
Oh,
Balfagor.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, Balfagor.
Yeah, he talked about, well, yeah, the Wi-Fi sucks, but we've got this newsletter, so yeah.
What do you think, Carole Stokes?
Well, again, I feel as the seasons progressed, some of that zest from we'll say the first half of Supernatural kind of got mellowed. The teeth were pulled a little bit, and the demons were all like, people wearing nice black suits, and the angels were all people wearing nice gray suits,
Right.
and they were all just kind of wearing these nice outfits and suits, and complaining about the bureaucracy of their respective realms. And in the very beginning, when we see Dean strung out on the hooks and the cables and he's screaming, and we know that hell is like bad, like a bad place. And evil, unspeakable things are happening to people there. And when Dean talks about getting off, his rack to pick up the knife for to start doing these things, we just know how terrible it is. And, in those later seasons, we don't get any of that kind of sense. And I like the idea. I mean, I think the whole endless line, kind of thing has a particular, I think it has a good place in hell, but I don't see it as all of hell,
Right,
but
right.
like if you have your rings of hell, let's say, so maybe that's the third ring, and then that's great because, that is a really horrible way to have to spend eternity. But I'd like to think that Rowena kind of even if she didn't get back to the torture or anything, but like you said, she is insidious, and she's very, I don't want to say deceitful, there's a lot going on. She's like giving you the nice smile and the tea, but underneath it, yes, you don't know what's going to happen. And, you may have your nice reception, but when you go back to the dormitory or whatever, who knows what's going to be waiting for you there. And
Right.
he's got a much better, I think, sense of evil, of darkness, let's say, than Mark Shepard's Crowley was more a matter of, let me make things as uncomfortable for everybody as I can, but not necessarily,
right, because,
but not necessarily evil, dark, torturous.
Well, I think too that he was also, I said something about the status quo, but I think that for him, one of the reasons he didn't like hell is because it was kind of boring.
Yeah.
If this is all you're doing, then why hang around? Why,
Yeah.
maybe he didn't have, he was more interested in, just keeping it going and, getting out himself outside for a while so that he didn't have to put up with it.
I love the idea of the line and stuff being one of the upper levels of hell, maybe for people who cheated on their taxes or parked in handicapped spots when they weren't qualified, right. But then the ninth level going on down, those are for the people who did really bad stuff and deserve all of that. Mm-hmm. So I like that. And I think actually both Crowley and Rowena were capable of dealing that out, even if we didn't see it on screen. Oh, sure. At least that's my headcanon. Mm-hmm. Well, folks, once again, we have blown through the time. I think we'll definitely need to come back and re-examine Crowley and the whole Hell Gang. But for now, there he goes, summoning
the Hell Gang.
But before we leave, please let us know where we can find you online, starting with Carole Malcolm.
Yes, right now, busy time of year. Dragon Con is in 2 days. So if you go to Facebook and just put in Dragon Con Urban Fantasy, you'll go right to the track page, and that's where you'll find out lots of things that we have going on right now. Most of them are about, actual con. The rest of the year, it might be anything related to any of the shows that we cover, including Supernatural. And if you go to YouTube and put in Dragon Con Urban Fantasy, you will find all of our YouTube content, which we do have all of the 15 rewind episodes, and we have some other Supernatural content, other media content, and then also author interviews, because the track is a hybrid track and cover both books and media.
Awesome. Carole Stokes.
I'm on Facebook. I'm often in the TFWNC group that Gail moderates. You'll see me a lot in the continual group and on continual panels. On Twitter, you can find me as true_firesign10, and all of my fiction is on AO3 under firesign10, mind the tags.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I'm on all the social media channels, and you can find me there with some variation of either of the names. I do run the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook, and I'm a staff writer for the Winchester Family Business, as well as a frequent panelist for Dragon Con Urban Fantasy. But mostly, you can find me here on Continual. So thank you both so much for spending some time with us tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon on Continual, so we'll see you online.